right, and a nice transition right into network states and special economic zones. More of a fireside format conversation. I could sit with Yaler and with Kyle.
Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Smith. I'm the lead of grants at Lexdow, and I also work at Ixion, which is a law firm in Prospera that they were just talking about. It's the only law firm in Prospera that is arm's length with Prospera itself.
Hi everyone, my name is Yaler Moon. I run events like the one you're sitting at. We also host events in Costa Rica. We're building up a Network City spin-off called Meta Campus right now in Costa Rica, and I helped create Meta Cartel DAO a few years ago and did a lot of years of grant giving and work in the community ecosystem.
And you know me well, all too well. I'm Tertius from Lexdow. I am now hosting events. Many thanks to great work by Yaler helping me out. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I also have a private practice and I'm doing some startup work, but in this case, I'm very much here for Lexdow. So if you want to start off, Kyle, on kind of the special economic zone you know well.
I think we can frame it a little bit too, because Kyle and I were chatting a little bit about this before we jumped on, and I think there's two sides of it. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about law. I hardly ever follow the laws, which creates interesting challenges. But talking about what communities want, right? What the ecosystem wants, and then from the legal perspective, the sort of regulatory arbitrage. So let's go into your side of it, your perspective of it, coming at it from the incorporating in Honduras and what the benefits are to you, and then I can talk a little bit about community development and formation.
Well, yeah, so especially remember what we were talking about beforehand. These are network states, so if they work well, they're networked, and so we can go from one state to another state to another state. We're really early, so there aren't really any states. Prospera is one of the farthest along, if not the most far along, because it's been around already 10 years or so. But there's still lots to do, especially on the Web3 side of communicating. But there's this idea, a legal kernel that Professor Tom Bell thought up, and then he took these model laws like UCC, which is the model law that USA uses. So if you go from state to state, even though each state gets to decide what its contract law is, it's relatively uniform. So when you go from Colorado to Wyoming, it's not that different, even though each one does determine on its own, and because that's because of the UCC. And so Tom compiled the UCC and then a few other laws, and then that's the ULEX kernel, and that's the kernel underlying Prospera. Prospera is going to grow past just this special economic zone in Honduras, but it will be quite useful if many of these network states use this kernel, or we keep it down to 2 or 3 kernels max. This kernel is on the common law, not on the civil law. These days, common and civil are quite overlapping, but there is a difference. So that might be one of the reasons we have multiple kernels. We might have a civil law-based kernel, though. Yeah.
If you don't mind, when you say kernel, do you mean like some kind of shared contract, some kind of language? Like, what is that?
Yeah, shared legal, shared laws, but fundamental laws like contract law and other really sort of basic laws that we need to be able to communicate from state to state. So if you sign a contract in one of these network states in Honduras, and then you want to enforce it in Zanzibar, you actually can do that if we all have this same underlying kernel. So we want to keep it just like it's called a kernel because of computer kernels. So like the Linux kernel, it's a small bit of code that all the rest of your code runs through, and that allows many different kinds of apps, many different kinds of programs to run in the operating system. That's what a kernel is about, is kind of the Rosetta Stone of your machine. So we're taking that concept and putting it into the legal system. So just the really kind of, if you burn off all the rest, what you need to have the sort of basics of law, for instance, contract law, having the consensus ad idem, and the privity and the, what's the third one? Consideration. Yeah, I mean, those 3 basic things, all that. So we don't really want to do any more. We want to have just the basic, kind of the foundation of law that we can then exchange between the different states, because one of the goals of network states is that we have plurality. So each network state, or pardon me, each state specializes in certain areas where it has strengths. And then, and Prospera, there's this concept of polycentric law. So people can opt into the whatever regulations they want to use in Prospera. So if they want to use, say, California law because they're used to operating with that, they can. If they want to pick Spanish law for some reason, they can decide. And then as long as we do a regulatory election in our firm, and then that tends to get approved by the mayor fairly quickly. And then the big trick with this to make sure that people aren't just choosing really bad regulations so they can move fast is the insurance provider. There has to be an insurance provider, and they also have to agree to it. So within this particular state, this particular node, Prospera, we want to have a lot of variety, and then we want to even have more variety between the various nodes, so that the different states are even more arm's length from each other.
Let me ask you a little bit, because you've been to Prospera, I haven't. How are they thinking about attracting, entrepreneurs, businesses, communities to form in Prospera right now? What are some of those early experiments?
Yeah, the most successful one is biotech, longevity. So Vitalia, it's a pop-up city, it's forked off of Zuzulu, and it's focused. Vita Dow is one of the main backers of it, and so its main innovation is this polycentric law. But that's really helpful for medicine. So there's MiniCircle, that's the most established company so far in the biotech industry, and they do gene therapy. Gene therapy won't be available in the U.S. probably for 10 years or so. But
is that because of regulations and restrictions around law and medicine?
The FDA takes quite a while. Yeah, for a drug to be approved by the FDA, if it hasn't already been approved, you have to show that it doesn't cause any harm and that it also has an effect. And that takes a while to do so. So, yeah.
So Vitalia is effectively like creating a Schelling point for people who want to live forever and come down to Prospera and experiment on themselves, perhaps, and other people.
Yeah, that is the point of it. We also have a cybernetic team that is augmenting people's, turning them into cyborgs.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah. I mean, communities will form around whatever the mission and vision is for them, right? It's all about shared ethos. I think with our experience, like launching DAOs and working in the Ethereum DAO ecosystem, it's like, what brings us together? What is that uniting force? The thing that motivates us is, creating new worlds, creating new opportunities, and kind of very often exiting the existing infrastructure or ecosystem because it feels restrictive or it feels like archaic in many senses. So we go forward and we break stuff, right? We just try things, we launch things, whether they're approved by our lawyers or not. I think it's just like about experimentation and innovation. But that spirit of innovation, that spirit of pushing the bounds helps to inform some of the experiments that are happening across the ecosystem. So teams who want to incorporate, who want to, do these things structurally sound, can then look at what we've done and what we've worked on and then make informed decisions. I also think like 5 years ago when we were doing DAOs, there was very few people who were like, innovating and thinking about this now. Now things are moving at light speed. There's a lot more opportunities. And I think nation states are catching on to the theme that this thing is going to bring a lot of interest, a lot of potential, monetization, and it's going to single these places out as hubs for innovation and drive progress to their people. So it's all beneficial for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, in tagging on the previous conversation about Beyond Borgs and kind of what I think a lot about at LexDAO is how does the legal infrastructure get built up? In a similar way that we are breaking TradFi, how can we build the kernel levels, the base levels to build up that legal innovation so that it outpaces the quality of regulatory law? That seems not too complex to me in the context, at least of some transparency, some reporting, some bookkeeping. How do we work together as a legal community and legal engineer and dev community to start building some of that, both in support of special economic zones and states so that they can utilize that and incorporate it there, and so that as we engage in these activities, these communities, how is it not something that has a bunch of the negative externalities that regulators are so concerned about?
I do think, like, if we're being honest, right, in order for DeFi to break TradFi, like, we have to break some laws. Like, it's just already been done. We're on the process, and now we're moving backwards to remedy those things and clean up the books. But it requires, flexing and breaking things sometimes to then peel it back and say, all right, what can we do and how can we innovate? So the more the regulators support us in that, the more friendly we're going to attract to those regions that kind of see the thing. I mean, that's why Switzerland is winning as one of the hubs for creating, entities and having your own tokens and such like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we're doing this network state thing because we're carving out areas of sovereignty so we can actually just make the laws instead of break them. It's actually flabbergasting that our law firm can just enact legislation, basically. So it's like we're a boutique law firm. You're just going straight and making the legislation. So obviously we've got the actual government that's saying yes, but it's just so quick. It's effectively us just, yep, we're going to do this. And then that's obviously a sandbox, but we've got a bunch of different network states through that sandbox, enough breathing room to actually do the experiment, and then we can lobby in DC and such. So I'm personally president of DAO Coalition, and it's still, we're waiting for the 501c4, so we haven't really done very much, but that's going to be part of this as well, is look how it's working in these network states. It's all right. There's this concept that koala model law. That's another one like UCC, but that's one that our community has done. Primavera and Moshe and a few other people. And they've come up with this concept when they did koala that is regulatory equivalence. So that's great. We can code and say, look, we're having the same reporting on chain just kind of automatically, so we don't have the extra overhead, but we're still getting to the same conclusion the regulators want. And so that's the strategy, but with these network states, we can not just do regulatory equivalence, but actually have little microcosms, little experiments of legislation. So give it a little bit more traction, and then we should hopefully have more oomph when we bring it to larger markets.
How do you think about protecting the innovative spirit of these sandbox regulations from moneyed interests? Like, how do you keep things like above board and moving forward without like getting these laws sold out like to so many of the things that we see in the ecosystem today?
Well, I mean, the insurance is an interesting one because the insurance provider, if there's going to be harm, then they're going to have to pay out on that. There definitely within Prosper, there's still VC lensing, and it's not anything different than that. A big difference is, there's still the startup hope, but lots of industries that in established markets are oversaturated, like law or medicine. There's hardly any provider. So when I've been chatting with VCs, they're starting to think more and more like, oh, this is kind of like a bond for a, like say the city of Chicago, like an incorporated city. And yeah, these Prosper is incorporated. It's different, but it's got sovereignty just like a city incorporated. It doesn't have criminal sovereignty, so it's different there, but it has vertical sovereignty. So on the sort of county municipal level up to the federal level, it has all that capacity.
So it doesn't have a criminal sovereignty in like it can't charge people with crimes. Okay, interesting. So the nation state itself, that would be the laws in terms of criminality, but business regulation and structure, they have the rights to choose that and organize that.
Yeah, on both the state and Fed level.
It's kind of like the best of both worlds, right? Like you would take the business and deal with it, and we'll let you deal with the criminals.
Except for the the crimes that are nonviolent crimes. So there's cannabis is outlawed there, and other areas where we would have we'd be experimenting. We can't because of under criminal, but we're looking at other countries that are have a similar kind of potentially structure in their constitution, but have criminal laws that allow people who in our network, a lot of us like marijuana, so that's
we like to smoke weed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe back in the same context of how does this get somewhere and how does this move toward, if we're going to, if not we, but you, are going to break laws along the way, how do you break laws in a way that don't fit into this realm of what is kind of more the clear scam, more the clear, and knowing that as you develop ways of advancing technology, there will be people who are opportunistic, whether it's from a money management overtake and utilization of kind of law arbitrage, or whether it's people who just see opportunity without repercussion and maybe are much less risk averse than some others and create, very bad public image and very negative consequences.
Can you summarize that? Just like, there was a question in there, but I lost it.
So how do we help people? How do people break things, and how do maybe lawyers help them not break very bad things?
Okay,
obviously not assist in breaking the law.
Right. Definitely not. I mean, to me, it always comes back to like integrity and intention. Like if you have integrity and you're building something that you believe is fundamentally going to serve the public, serve the community, serve the interests of whatever group you're representing, then you're going to have a lot less people angry at you, a lot less people who want to come after you. So you do what you say you're going to do, and there's an economic value to that, right? If you're a DAO, you're a protocol, you're creating something new. The goal is to like communicate as much as you can what you're doing and why you need to experiment or explore in this new way, which could be breaking the law specifically. There are so many laws, right? There are so many things that we need to adhere to. And sometimes it's going to require us to be flexible with them, and then to find ways that work to serve the interests of the community. I think that very often there is the disconnect between, the sense of like founders and what they want to create and how they want to re-envision and reimagine the world, and then what they feel they can do with inside the regulatory landscape that they have. I mean, we're working in Costa Rica, and we have barely even contacted the government because in Costa Rica, there's a very friendly regulation that allows us to bring residents in and create an entity, and the entity can be owned by a U.S. entity. So we don't need to break any laws at this moment, not yet, because the existing framework allows us to innovate and allows us to kind of leaves us alone effectively. So we're building like what would be a mini village, right, for 150 people. It's not a huge thing on the roadmap yet, but the goal would be to create these networked cities that are maybe all over Costa Rica, and that then when we can show that these things are producing economic value, they're bringing talent to the country, we can have a conversation with the government that's a little bit more friendly, and we can offer something to them so that even if we did break some laws along the way, they're a bit more friendly. They understand that we're trying to do good things for the people in the country, we're trying to do good things for the community and the ecology specifically, because Costa Rica is really big on green and blue zones. So I think like providing value first is one of the most important things you can do. Like, sure, you can launch a shitcoin and get a few people rich, but you could create a protocol that liberates and gives voice to millions of people, or brings people on board into a digital ecosystem that they didn't have access to before. So it comes down to just doing the right thing, having good intention, having good integrity, and following through with it.
So yeah, I think a big part of it is recognizing how important this movement is as well, and so people need to be responsible, and laws that are perhaps themselves unjust, and so maybe they really are, say like if they breach habeas corpus but they're on the books, well, arguably then sometimes people have to have an obligation to oppose laws that are unlawful. It's a bit difficult of a topic, but anyway, getting aside from those kind of hopefully edge cases. So one of the narratives that is in Prosper is Hondurans, if they're in Honduras, the exact same Honduran, if they're working in Honduras, only make something like $3,000 a year, so something really small. And then if they're in USA, they make $30,000 a year. So it's basically a 10x multiple. So the exact same person, they're in the USA, and sort of the thesis behind Prosper is that's all governance. So if we have good governance, if we can rely on the rule of law, all of that, then we can really unleash the latent human potential, and that's global. So one person who spoke at one of our summits, Magate Wade, I think her name is, she's representing the work that's being done in Africa, and she just said outright to us, we better not fuck it up, because there's a lot of people that are incredibly impoverished, and they want to get out of it, and so this is the chance that we can unleash latent human potential.
And I think something to that point as well is like, when you think about coming into a place, like if you're looking at traditional American structures, it's like we come in, we take, we build a wall, you serve us kind of thing. The future, I think, is these permeable membranes between the digital community that's formed online, the DAO perhaps, and then the local community. Like, how do you build bridges between the local population to actually like serve and partner with them, not just to service their businesses, right? Not just to go to spend money in the country, but to actually develop relationships, right, between the people that are trying to do things differently and trying to move laws forward, so that the citizens of these countries feel happy for you being there. They feel that your presence is benefiting them and that they like you being there. I think that's something that like we've done wrong historically in the past a lot, not obviously across the board, but I've seen it done a lot. And so there's a lot of scarring there that we need to go back and hold a bit of a bit of patience, a bit of understanding, a bit of empathy, so that we can try to do things better this time. Because, people fool me once, fool me twice, that whole thing. People are going to build calluses against when they feel they're being taken from, right? So we can do these things that Kyle's speaking about. We can create these economic zones, create amazing opportunities, and we can as well establish relationships and build communities that take into account more than just the interests of one online community, and that bridge worlds. So that's my goal. That's my hope for this movement.
And definitely try to hire local, maybe like a 10-to-1 ratio. I mean, our firm hasn't gotten there, but we are hiring Hondurans way more than than people outside of Honduras, and the other communities in Prosper are doing the same. And then for power positions, certain power positions, definitely put locals in those spots. When it's land, be especially sensitive to that. So if buying up a bunch of land, have locals as part of that ownership. And then hopefully have the ownership be a steward type thing anyway. But it's definitely, if locals see themselves in the community, the network state community, then it's much more likely to thrive and also be robust. Like Prosper right now, the government is antagonistic and trying to get rid of Prospera, but because Prospera has spent so much time building relationships with the local community, and involving them in the development of Prospera with jobs and all the real stuff, there's Prospera probably would not, the government would have succeeded, but for the local Hondurans saying, no, this is actually an experiment worth having. Let's do it. So definitely, keep that in mind.
Yeah, does anyone have questions? We've been rambling up here a bit. Any have questions out there?
This may be more of an offline question for me to ask you, Kyle. I was just curious, how does the structuring with the law firm work? Like, are you allowed to do it by the government? How does that work? Particularly, right, the people that are just practitioners, all that.
Well, the special economic zone itself, it doesn't actually have a set. It's very libertarian, so it doesn't have a set. But the lawyers that are doing the actual like dotting I's and crossing T's and all that are Honduran, full-on Honduran lawyers, and so we'll probably keep on doing that. I'm personally doing legal engineer work. Ramona's doing structuring work, so we're staying out of the like direct kind of administrative legal. But Prosper, you could kind of push the limits there a bit. I mean, one of the reasons we set up shop is because we could have I think it's the world's first legal engineering law firm. So we're not separating the jobs, that they're kind of one and the same. But yeah, we're kind of going off of a Honduran BART, even though the special economic zone, we don't actually need to do that.
Anybody else?
So, I guess the other question I have, when I hear you talk about the network state and the choice of laws that's going on there, how do you compare that to traditional choice of laws or even traditional adoption of UCC versus the approach that are following in the network state? And how do we persuade the rest of the people in the U.S., leave people more flexible?
Yeah, I mean, the flexible is nice, but because we're implementing it, I'm also saying that there's going to be a lot of law asymmetry is already a problem, and it's going to be even more so because there's going to be tons and tons of legislation. AI, luckily AI is around, so I think that can offset it. You just, TLDR, so an AI can bubble it up, even though AI hallucinates and such, so it's not, we do work with one AI company that has it, so it only references statutes, which is what this is, right? So it's not case law. It's not as kind of bespoke in the language, and then it also has clear citations. But yeah, that is a problem with it. We haven't seen it yet because it's a blank slate legal area, so it's actually hardly any laws. But I can see if we're very successful, we'll actually have far more laws than a traditional territory. I personally don't know. I mean, the amount of rigidity that US has and the amount of fluidity that Prosper has, it might turn out to be the right way, that we have this kind of composite, and these network states are a part of that composite, as long as we can learn from our neighbors, and so we can bring it to DC and we can bring it to the different states and say, hey, look, it works here. Why don't you then, because it is working here, we can try it in this larger context. That would be good. Looking at the way things are working so far, that's me being very optimistic and naive. So I think we'll probably maybe do an Uber kind of thing where we just move really fast. But that takes VCs to be involved as well to do so, and then kind of go like, well, look, it's working, but we can move fast, even more so because we've tried it out in a special economic zone, so we know exactly what to implement, and we've already learned from the mistakes. But I mean, like for real world assets, that's really exciting, Prospero, because we can do all kinds of tokenomics and have it on the land title registry. And each U.S. county has its own way of doing it, and so that is so. We talk about decentralized a lot, but when things are kind of fractured to the point, that's the case a lot in the U.S. My background originally is music publishing, and similar, like the way that royalties are done with PROs and the publishers. There's so much bloat there. That's yeah, we all see it as a bug, but in that industry, it's a feature because lots of people get employed for it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just see what areas are the lowest lift, what move with the least amount of work, and then just do those, and then hopefully go back to those other areas that were really stuck, and they might be a little bit more flexible. But, yeah.
I'm curious to think about one of the questions earlier, sort of surfaced the notion of like potentially huge black eyes, right? And you remember the effect of altruism community when the young man America's things got a massive downgrade, right? And it strikes me that network states that are like by definition permissive to anything that is not already explicitly prohibited is allowed, and you're likely at some point to attract like Dr. Jekyll energy, and something that is going to like potentially shock the conscience of the normies. Maybe it is something that you're more comfortable with, but how do you think about policing and who to say no to, who to exclude? What are the sort of things that you would need from an internal consensus perspective in a network state to think about where you would draw those lines to potentially immunize yourself from a Dr. Jekyll, digital version?
Yeah, so for the more exotic things, just recognizing there's a wider movement we're doing, at least at Vitalia, we've held ourselves back for the more eccentric sides of Vitalia. Constant thinking about what we look like on Twitter, especially because there are Twitter wars constantly back and forth between Prospera and other groups. So there's an active battle scene to some extent. Yeah. So we're mindful of not just making that worse. And then the whole idea of, one of the reasons why, even though Honduras is a civil system, that this special economic zone prospers specifically, and there are other SEZs that they're called SEZs that have used this constitution, and so they're not this way. Actually, there's two other ones, and then they got shut down before more SEZs could develop. But they're all kinds of governance. But in Prospera, which is we picked the common law, or they picked common law, and I thought it was a good idea being a common law person, is because people, it's not so much let's figure out every single case possible and then legislate that like the civil law does, and then everyone's supposed to follow the rules. It's really wait until something bad happens, then make case law, type of thing. So you're not really telling other people what to do. And so in a common law system that is really healthy, people should feel like if they're not told no, then they can do it, right? They're not supposed to wait for somebody to say yes, ask for forgiveness type of philosophy, and especially with the accelerationist movement, that makes more sense because it takes forever to ask somebody if they approve, and they might not even understand what you're up to in the first place, and none of us can really, of mice and men, we can't really expect what's going to go down. But that's the reason why insurance is so critical, because invariably when harm does occur, then that's where the insurance provider steps in, and the insurance provider should constantly be paying attention. So they see that company is taking on too much risk,